Steve,
Thank you.
this arm doesn't want to help this arm get much.
Great enough, then.
My mom did get it done, Bill.
Doing that on the way down for the time being.
I'm so worried that she feels funny. Yeah, yeah. Has he done one on the park still?
Yes, he has. It might even be loaded up on YouTube, but if it's not, I'll look for it and see if I can share the link with Jill.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know about you, Adam, but we got cookies on this end.
Oh, don't be that way. That's not kind.
I'll put one in an envelope and mail it to you.
Just hand it over. Let's go. I need some coffee too. I'm drinking this sparkling water and it just isn't hitting the spot.
Yeah, she'll put that in an envelope and send it to you.
Crunchy cookie crumbs.
Yeah.
Ah,
Open coffee.
I thought you would eat these during this winter.
mine.
Was it just the cake or were they cut up like this?
No, I just cut them up.
Okay.
Going back in time.
I was thinking, see that.
I heard your better half is retired.
She's retired.
Yeah.
I think she's about ready to go back to work.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Keep her.
Don't go back to the dark side.
Work.
Oh, you're. 5 years ago, I made a to-do list of all the things I was gonna get done during my retirement. I don't think I've even crossed out now. What was your work, Carol?
I was an environmental inspector for the city of Omaha. My primary area is,
Yeah. The palm branches be in the kitchen.
soil and erosion.
Or in the fridge or, yeah, I'm gonna put them in the fridge when I fridge.
I really did
That's what I
like
tell them all. You got my email about who's,
You have to kind of like it.
Who's handing them out and so forth. oh, when did you send that?
Yeah.
Cause you have to be outside all kinds of
I
weather,
think that
right?
Wednesday or something. You don't really need to, I don't think you care.
That's Nebraska, you got all extremes and everything in between.
In one day.
Yeah.
Does anyone want a copy?
I just took the last cup.
Pastor, we'll drink it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam Fletcher.
I got my pictures of our. It bothers you. It bothers you to be. Yes.
All right, everybody. It's 11 a.m. We ready to do this? It's 1 p.m. That's what I meant to say.
Yes, yes.
On the dot. All right, everybody. My name's Adam Fletcher Sasse, and I am joining you today at the behest, at the gift of Mt Olive. Thank you, Jill and Mt Olive, for having me. I'm very appreciative and grateful of this opportunity to share with y'all. For those of you who don't know, I am the editor and writer and researcher and guy behind NorthOmahaHistory.com. If you are into reading, if you like pictures, if you like social media, go to North Omaha History and take a look. I have 800 plus free articles all on North Omaha History for anybody to look at. For about 15 years now, I've been researching and writing this with just ridiculous commitment to it. Because I love it. This is my passion project. You can't actually see this. I'm wearing a scruffy t-shirt today, but across it, it says Miller Park because I'm representing. For those of you who don't know, I am in Portland or just outside of Portland, Oregon. The temperature here today is 58 degrees and it's drizzling outside. It's gray. I'm in my tiny cabin that I built with my own 2 hands 4 years ago now. Yeah, it's just a nice morning here. It's still 11 a.m. And I'm glad that you all joined in, and I'm ready to do this thing, and I hope you are too. I am recording this morning's session. I do intend on putting it up on YouTube and sharing it on Facebook and Instagram and all the places. So again, North Omaha history for those of you who do that thing. Today's presentation, I'm excited to do. Jill and I spoke a few weeks ago about her dad's interest in the U.S. Mills building. Everybody remember the U.S. Mills building down at 30th and Taylor? It's still there right now. And it was an exciting conversation because of all of the history that's in that building. We're going to touch on it today, but notice that this session isn't about just U.S. Mills. I decided that it needed to be in a bigger picture. So we're going to talk about the history of 30th and Ames. And when I say 30th and Ames, I'll show a picture of that in just a minute. But yeah, I'm excited because I haven't done this presentation yet. This is a new one. So let's do it. Let's see how this turns out. On this first page, I just wanted to tease you with a few images. These were on the flyer as well. We'll see them all again in a few minutes. But first, let's look at this aerial photo. 1950s. 30th and Ames is the intersection right in the middle. You can see a school bus right there, or a moving van. I don't know which one it is. In the upper left-hand corner of the intersection, there's a mobile gas station. On the right-hand side, there's a standard gas station. In the upper right-hand corner of 30th and Ames in this aerial shot. In the bottom right-hand corner of the 30th and Ames intersection, iconic institution that was Ames Bar and Grill. Lots of people have fond memories of it. An unspoken part of the reality of Ames Bar and Grill is that it was severely segregated. They didn't let black people in. But then on the left-hand side of the photo, you can see the image, and this is the clearest image that I know of that shows the lighthouse on the top of anybody? The Beacon Movie Theater. The Beacon Movie Theater at 29th and Ames.
Which streets are which?
So
Ordinance.
up down in the photo from center, well, approximately center left to approximately the right hand corner, that's North 30th Street. You can see it's 4 lanes in the shot.
Okay.
And then Ames is going left to right.
Okay.
Everybody got that? Now that's orienting you, and some people are putting together the rest of the picture. For you eagle-eyed observers, in this photo, you're going to see Burke & Berry's, an iconic grocery store. Lots of people know about it. You're going to see Hested's, St. Vincent de Paul, and the roof of Gatchell's. More will be revealed shortly. Oh, and by the way, can anybody name the grocery store parking lot that's on the southeast corner? So in the left and down from the big intersection in the middle. That's a grocery store, and it's facing Ames Avenue. And that's a parking lot right there. Nobody? That was this little grocery store that was called Safeway.
Oh.
You're right. Yeah.
And we're going to get into that in a minute, because it's not the last Safeway building that was built at this intersection. Just so everybody knows, as an hour-long presentation, I will pack way too much in, and you will be... I won't cover everything. I'm inevitably going to miss something, but we're going to talk about it at the end, hopefully have a Q&A minute to be able to talk about what I did miss and what you'd like to see. Now, this is kind of a complex map. This is a fire insurance map from 1910. And you can see I've roughly outlined the areas that I'm going to talk about today. The deep red lines going up and down, that's 30th Street. On the bottom of that is Taylor. And on the top, we know it today is Sorensen Parkway. Back then it was a railroad, which had a trellis going across 30th Street. Anybody remember the trellis? The red line going left to right is Ames Avenue. And I'm going to go from about 29th Street to about, well, 28th to about 31st. I'm going to mention a few other places. And then I highlighted in red at the bottom of the screen the other part of today's presentation that captures U.S. Mills and its role, which is the Beltline Railway. And we're going to talk about that.
Not too much.
Well, don't.
Old beastie.
It's fine. Oh. Just-
To help frame this conversation, I've broken it out into 4 different eras for 30th and Ames. I move around these eras. I shift them on every conversation. If you've been in other ones, you've seen me do this other ways. But when I thought about 30th and Ames,
Well, then you can tell who's on.
when I thought about 30th and Ames, I thought about 4 real eras
When
of
was it?
time. We good?
Yeah,
Okay. Just want to make sure. Stop me if I need to. Okay.
well,
So
they
for
were your voices and they weren't yours, so.
that's cool. It'll work that way. All right. So 4 real eras. The Pioneer Era. That's right. 30th and Ames existed in 1854.
Can you see?
Wrap your head around that. 1854. Almost 175 years ago. So the first one is the Pioneer Era from 1854 to 1880. Then the Beltline Era, that talks about that railroad that was owned by Missouri Pacific. Its prime was 1888 to about 1910, 20, somewhere in there. We're going to chop it up. We're going to talk about the Kenwood area. That's what I'm calling it, the Kenwood area. Kenwood was never the formal name of a subdivision or the formal name of a neighborhood. But a lot of people know about 30th and Ames and refer to it as Kenwood, and a lot of businesses were referred to it as Kenwood, and I'm going to tell you why. And then finally, we're going to talk about the modern era, and it's kind of the longest one. I grouped a lot of things into here, a lot of time. We're going to chop all these up and get into the details. So let's start at the beginning, the Pioneer Era. And let's even dash just a little bit backwards from that and acknowledge that for 3,000 years or so, a lot of Native American tribes lived in the region and hunted in the region that is today North Omaha, particularly around 30th and Ames. 30th and Ames was a prairie land. It was on the top of a big, flat, wide open area. You know about the hills to the west, the hills that climb up to North High, the hills that climb up to 33rd Street, and John A. Creighton Boulevard is at the bottom of a hill. If you think about it in your mental mind map, you can see that. You know about the hills that kind of climb up behind Fort Omaha, and the hills that used to be by, or that are by, where used to be the old Emmanuel Hospital. So you can envision those hills. And then you can picture the cliff down by 16th Street and Florence Boulevard. So the area between the cliff, it's at about 14th, and Florence Boulevard, the backside of the boulevard, all the way over to the hills, that whole area was wide open. It's called benchland. And it was a wide open prairie that had trees dotting it like a savanna in Africa almost, little oak trees and scrub cedar and different stuff that moved along these creeks. There was a creek that went right by 30th and Ames. It was actually north a little bit along the railroad, Sorensen Parkway. And that creek dashed from about 42nd and the Parkway all the way down to 27th, and then went along 27th, and it went up through Miller Park and out through Metaloosa. And today it's all been underground. It's put inside of a sewer, except for one part of it at the end over by OPPD that we know as Stink Creek.
Yes.
Stink Creek originally flowed by 30th and Ames.
Pastor used to live right by that creek.
There you go. So this Pioneer Era, these pioneers, we know about the Mormons coming in way up north. They were separate and away from 30th and Ames. And we know about the Omahans settling down around, they did their picnic on Capitol Hill where Central High is today. And that was 1854. But in 1854, there were already land speculators.
Did Max text you?
In 1854, there were already land speculators. There were already people guessing about what's going to be worth money, who's going to be able to sell what and make money off of it. There was a country road that ran north from about 30th and Dodge to Florence. It was not 30th Street. It was actually 29th Street. And in another session, another day, we're going to talk about this. But just know that at one point, 29th Street was the main road going north. 30th wasn't a big deal. They also didn't call it 30th at that point. We'll talk about that in just a second. Wagons, horses, mules, and walkers were the main users, the only users of these roads, really.
Did you mute yourself?
That was the,
Okay.
that was the
I was hearing you before, but just for the last.
Conestoga wagons and the prairie schooners and the land speculators.
Yeah.
There were small farmers all around. And yeah, lots of these early developments happened around 30th and Ames. Some of the primary forces in this pioneer era were Fort Omaha. Fort Omaha was officially opened in 1879. It was originally built out of wood. Do you know? All those officer rows that we love, they were made out of wood. There were soldier barracks that were made out of wood. The big buildings that we think are cool were made out of wood originally. And then they were rebuilt into brick in 1879. Here's a big deal. There's actually one of those original officer houses made out of wood still standing today in North Omaha. Does anybody know about it?
General.
All right. Take a look at social media sometime. Look for the Omaha History Farm. It's a brand new initiative launched by this guy named Tim Reeder, is a real estate guy. The house is over on Florence Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
I would tell you the exact address, but I don't remember it off my head. The point is, this house was built in 1879. In 1900, it was moved from Fort Omaha, sold to some gardeners. These guys had a greenhouse, and they moved it over to Florence Boulevard. This Tim Reeder, he's restoring it as the Omaha History Farm and its historic barn, and he's going to make it into a whole history thing. Check that out for local news about Florence Boulevard. Anyway, Fort Omaha was repeatedly abandoned. You can see this photo that I have right here. This is actually from the 1880s. These soldiers used to do these elaborate parade ground marches, and the cavalry would come in, the officers would ride horses. You could see the tents set up in the background along the parade grounds. That was Fort Omaha. And it was a large impetus for why 30th and Ames built up. The original neighborhoods and developments around Fort Omaha, I'm sorry, around 30th and Ames. 30th and Ames was part of what was originally called Script Town. Script Town was an illegal scheme by the Nebraska Territory Legislature to get people to vote for Omaha to be the state capital when it came around. 1854, this whole scheme was laid out, and people were given scrip, which is paper money, it's contracts basically, to own land if they were legislators, if they voted for Omaha. They did not become, of course, Omaha didn't become the state capital, but it stayed the territorial capital until 1867. And a lot of people speculate that was because of Script Town. And Script Town included 30th and Ames. Now I'm going to confuse you because I didn't highlight anything on this map that's right there, that little cutaway. That's an 1880 map. The blue line that goes from the top to the bottom with a number 4 right in the middle, that number 4 is where 30th and Ames is today. You can see the black line just below it that curves at an angle on Boyd Street. That's the Beltline Railway. It was originally laid out as a separate special wagon road. A really interesting history there. But the point is, other developments that were happening that prompted 30th and Ames to emerge as a commercial district were Saratoga, that was started in 1857 over at 24th and Grand Avenue. Not Ames, but Grand. Eventually the center of 30th, or I'm sorry, of the Saratoga neighborhood moved down to 24th and Ames. West Saratoga, which was way out. It was a wagon ride away at 42nd and Grand. Became known as Cherry Hill, and then finally landed on the name Central Park. And the Central Park neighborhood was established in 1860 at 42nd and Grand. Remember all those businesses that everybody's story tells about and they think were grand? That's from 1860. Of course, the Monmouth Park neighborhood, a lot of folks know it, love it, might even live there. That's where Emmanuel Hospital was. North High was built right across the street. Yep. 1881. 1882, Collier Place. That's the northwest corner of 30th and Ames. Its own subdevelopment. 400 houses originally. Boyd's Addition. That's the southwest corner and the southwest part of 30th and Ames. Kenwood. Kenwood was an informal name given to the whole area because of...
Kenwood Feed.
Say that again?
Kenwood Feed?
Close. But Kenwood Feed was actually named after the Kenwood Telephone Exchange.
Right.
That was the first. That was, you know, right. That was next. 1912 is when that was built, and I'm going to show you a picture of it in a minute. And then, of course, Bedford Place neighborhood on the southwest corner of where that big number 6 is on this historic map. That's Bedford Place, and it was developed last around 1885. Huge suburban development. Of course, there's this beastie. Anybody recognize it?
Florence.
Florence School?
No.
Okay.
So this building was designed by a man named Thomas Rogers Kimball, Omaha's premier architect. And this was Monmouth Park School
Oh.
at 33rd and Ames. Monmouth Park looked like this. It actually only came down in 1993.
Oh.
It was closed in 1980 and converted into apartments. Then the apartments ran into rough times by the late 80s. Nobody wanted to live there. It was a whole thing. And then the roof blew off in a windstorm and they just demolished the building instead of trying to preserve it. But this was Monmouth Park. And today there are public houses that are right there, a public housing development. The Beltline era. I need to frame this out. So the Beltline Railway was a railway that traversed North Omaha. It went from 15th and Webster, went all along the east side of the cliffs that I mentioned earlier by 14th Street, east of 16th. Before you get to Carter Lake, it was down in the bottoms right there. And it went north. And then at Saratoga, it followed the south side of Ames on Boyd Street. And that's what you see at the top of this map right here. There's a line that curves and it says Oak Chatham Depot. In 1885, the Oak Chatham Depot was built right at 23rd and Ames, approximately. You could see this line continue on. It goes over 30th Street. The top of this map, where the white border is, that's Ames Avenue. Just to put this all in perspective. You see where it says Druid Hill Depot? That was just about at the intersection, just south of the intersection of Paxton Boulevard and John A. Creighton Boulevard. So 2 depots that served the 30th and Ames area. This is all walking distance. The point of these depots was to be close enough to where people lived that they could hop on this passenger train it was opened as. It eventually became a freight train that moved stuff through the industrial areas of North Omaha, and we're definitely going to talk about those at 30th and Ames. On the left-hand side, you see a photo of one of the Missouri Pacific trains that moved along the Beltline. And on the right-hand side, it's my right, I guess. It should be yours too. Anyway, you'll see a photo of the crossing of the Beltline Railway over Boyd Street, just west of 30th. So that's what it looked like. This railroad was started in, as I said, 1885, and it stayed intact through the 1980s. It wasn't used after about 83, and then it was completely removed by 95. There were a lot of businesses that opened up around 30th and Ames because of that railroad. And the reason why I call it the Beltline era is because these businesses, they helped build the middle class that made North Omaha into what it became. Starting in the 1880s and going all the way through the 1950s into the 60s. These businesses, there were all kinds of different reasons why they existed, and they did all kinds of different things. But you'll see here a photo of the workforce that worked at the Douglas Trucks factory that was at 30th and Taylor. This photo was taken in 1914. Take a look at these guys. This was North Omaha's residential neighborhood around 30th and Ames. These are the guys who lived there. Some of them lived up in Florence. Some of them lived in Miller Park. Some of them lived in Minnelusa. Some of them lived south around 24th and Sprague. Notice that this workforce has no African Americans in it. A lot of the businesses around 30th and Ames, this isn't a political statement, it's just a matter of fact. A lot of these businesses were segregated. They didn't allow Black workers, they didn't allow Black customers. And African Americans weren't allowed to live in the area around 30th and Ames for more than 50 years after it was started. Again, not political, just a statement of fact. Now, the other thing to note about this group right here is that these were generally WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. However, they were also in the harder industrial factories of North Omaha. They were immigrants from Italy, from Sweden, from Germany, from England, but also from countries like Slovakia and Slovenia and Lithuania. There were Lutherans in this picture for sure. Probably some Methodists too. Definitely Catholics. We're going to get into them in a minute. But this Douglas Truck Factory, just south of 30th and Ames. Oh, the Douglas Truck Factory, by the way, was open into the 1930s. We're going to talk about its demise in a minute. But this Beltline Railway area, or the Beltline era, I mean, 20 factories within 3 blocks of 30th and Ames. Ladies and gentlemen, just wrap your head around that. 20 factories. Stinky, they were blowing out smoke and stuff, but they were also employing people, 5,000 middle-class jobs around 30th and Ames. Can you even picture that today? Industrial traffic all over. 30th Street was jam-packed with these big trucks, and they weren't rigs. They weren't semi-trucks that were pulling 100,000 pounds. But they were large trucks. And in an era when they were just getting used to cars, they had 50,000-pound trucks coming through, 20,000-pound trucks coming through. And they weren't hauling cows to the market. They were hauling chairs and furniture. They were hauling caskets and coffins. They were hauling tires, and they were moving trucks out. They were getting onto the Beltline Railway. They were moving along 30th Street to move stuff north and south. They were moving along Ames to bring stuff down to the more industrial area by 16th and 24th. So here on the left, you can see an ad for the Overland Tire and Rubber Company. Now, this photo was this picture was an architectural rendering of a factory that was a little bit bigger than what actually was built. The structure that ended up being built again at 30th, just south of Taylor, was 2 stories and only had the one building that's facing the street right there. But this building was originally 1 block south of Druid Hill School. Here in the middle, you see the Murphy, Wassey, and Coos Furniture Factory. I have an article on that on NorthOmahaHistory.com, also on the Overland Tire Company. But this furniture factory, this drawing was accurate to the scope and scale of the building. The remnants of this building still stand today, and you can go see them over on Bedford, where the old Beltline Railway was. Today, it's a 3-story building. They knocked a couple stories off. And then the far right photo, this was the Omaha Brush Company. And the Omaha Brush Company was there for more than 50 years at 28th and Boyd. That building, 28th and Boyd, more than 50 years. The brush company, they started, you can see on the side of the building, it says steel wire, fiber brushes, paint brushes, scrub brushes, this kind of thing. Later on, the Omaha Brush Company ended up making cosmetic brushes. I also have an article about that on NorthOmahaHistory.com. I like to leave these little trinkets along the way to bait you into looking up more. I always have more information about the things that I share. So if there's not enough, look it up on NorthOmahaHistory.com. Also the Q&A at the end. The Beltline era gave way to what I'm calling the Kenwood era. The Kenwood era is when 30th and Ames really took this identity as being a suburban commercial area. It became a force. Now remember that this is 1910 to 1965. So commerce back then looked different than it did now. This is before shopping malls. This is before, of course, before the internet and Amazon. All of this business, all of these services, all of this retail was done very locally. In these 4 photos right here, you get a snapshot of the earliest part of the Kenwood era. On the upper right-hand corner, you see the Florence Transfer Company warehouse number 2. This was on 30th Street facing 30th, approximately where the police station is today, the substation that's near 30th and Ames. You see those 6 trucks, and they have different company names on them, the Vaughn Company, the Florence Transfer Company. These were different companies that brought their stuff to the warehouse for storage. In the bottom right-hand corner, with the cars zooming in 1917, they're zooming by a couple different buildings. You'll notice that this is the northeast corner of 30th and Ames that we're looking at. And you might not recognize any of the buildings. You'd be forgiven if you don't. 2 of them are visibly the same as they are today, with a few modifications. If you squint, I have to wear my glasses in order to really see this well. In the middle of the photo, you'll see an awning sticking out with a tow truck underneath it. If you could guess that picture, if you see that awning, you'll see the top of that building has those stacks on it. That building today, or it used to be a tax building, right on the corner of 30th and the street that's just north of Ames. I'm not going to remember the name. Say it again.
Meredith?
Meredith, 30th and Meredith. This is on the southeast corner of 30th and Meredith. That building still stands. You'll notice what's missing between Ames and that building is the Gatchel Hardware building that was built in 1918, just after this photo was taken. The Gatchel building went in where the beer sign is. You can see that beer sign. And then just beyond that tow truck on the other side of Meredith, that was a Hinky Dinky store. And today that building still stands and was a laundromat for a long time. Also, you could see the railroad trestle crossing 30th Street to the north of that. That was only taken out in the 80s. I expect that some of you remember it. On the left-hand side of the photo, on the busy traffic side where all the cars are parked, there's a building right there that says Calvert on the side. I don't know what Calvert was a name for. It wasn't the business that was there, but that building eventually became the Ames Bar and Grill. You can see the standard gas station that was on the southwest corner of 30th and Ames. I'll show a modern photo of what that looks like today in a minute. And then those cars are parked across from the Inton Bittenmeyer Biscuit Company building. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. In the bottom left-hand corner, you could see a photo of St. Vincent de Paul. Well, you remember St. Vincent, the thrift store at 30th and Meredith. That was there all the way until the 1980s and 90s. My family shopped at St. Vincent's. Whoop. Then it became the Chinese restaurant.
Dragon 88.
Is Dragon 88 still open?
I don't know.
You know,
Yes.
they put the
Yeah.
awning up over the brickwork and the whole thing, but that's still the same building.
Dragon 88.
Of course, those buildings next to it to the left of St. Vincent, those are gone. They were demolished in the early 90s, late 80s for Burger King. History has no boundaries, right? That's the thing about this whole work. Some of it feels so ancient, even though it's just 100 years ago, but it's 100 years ago. And when we think about Amazon and Teslas and all of this technology, it's hard to really grok and understand the necessity and the urgency of these places. One of the reasons why I call this the Kenwood area is that everything was named after Kenwood. I'm going to show you a list in a little while. But the Kenwood Dress Shop, right at 30th and Ames, the Northside Bank. We know that the Northside Bank, from our presentation the other month, the Northside Bank began as
Bank of Florence.
the Bank of Florence. Moved to 31st and Ames. They closed out that old place in on Main Street, Florence Main Street, and they moved into 30th and Ames. Now, the thing to know is that they had 5 locations at 30th and Ames before they landed in their last building. The Holland Lumber Company at 30th and Ames, that's right, their very own. You see another ad for the Northside Bank right here. The Coffee House. I got pie at the coffee house with my dad when I was a young teenager. It was one of those special things.
Like the sign.
And then in the upper right-hand corner was an expansion of the Safeway store, but it wasn't an expansion. They rebuilt the whole thing in the early 1960s. This photo's from the North Omaha Booster, the North Side Booster. This building became Phil's Foodway. And today is the Phil's, I don't know what it's called anymore, the new grocery store that's there. Anybody? 31st and Ames.
We're not,
It's still.
we think it's still Phil's.
I thought they changed the suffix on, like it's a bag and save or Phil's something.
It's still Phil's, we're saying.
That's all that matters. Still Phil's. All that I know is that the dollar bread store was there, and that's where I stopped for apple pie things, pockets, when I was leaving school. Big deal. And shopping at Phil's. We'll just leave that there. Anyway, this was the construction of that building. The Kenwood era went on for a very long time. This is when, again, 30th and Ames really looked very middle class, working class, everyday people stuff. It seems like everybody remembers Burke and Berry. Burke and Berry was a grocery store that was at 29th and Ames next to the Beacon Theater, nearby the North Library. The Kenwood Bakery, of course, an icon in the area. Lots of people will talk about stopping there to get the best pie, the best fritter, the best whatever things we got at bakeries. And then, of course, the Kenwood Drug Company. Every neighborhood had its drugstores, and every drugstore was iconic to the people who lived in that neighborhood. So many people lived around 30th and Ames, and so many people relied on Kenwood Drug for all kinds of things for more than 40 years. Of course, the Kenwood Feed Store was the last iconic store in the area, and it only closed after the construction of the Sorensen Parkway in the early thousands. Back in the early thousands. It was already 20 years ago. Oh my goodness. Anyway, other iconic Kenwood era businesses. Ames Bar and Cafe, we mentioned that. Pat and George Cornwell, they opened it up as Cornwell's. And they ran it for 30 years, 30 some years. And then, of course, Hested's. Lots of people remember Hested's. It was a 5 and dime. Although now that I'm looking at the ad, it says right at the top, 5, 10, 25 cents.
Oh.
Yeah. So you could get let's see, chocolate peanuts, heavy dip, 39 cents a pound. Get ladies' blouses, 2 for $1.79. Men's handkerchiefs in white only for 10 cents a piece. And they sold towels by the pound.
Wow. So is this the one that, then did it move up Ames?
Yeah, so this was at 30th and Ames. It was just north of 30th and Ames. And then later on in the 60s, it moved up to the Ames Plaza. And they opened up a department store there instead of a 5 and dime. So the store was trying to evolve. In 1983, it was bought out by a larger chain that itself has long disappeared. And that's when it closed up there at about 47th or 52nd in Ames, in that region, Ames Plaza. Other Kenwood era icons in the neighborhood, of course, Gatchell's. Go to Gatchell's, just go buy something. Go ahead.
Oh, I think
Lots
people
of
A lot of muttering among ourselves here.
we've got mutterers here.
I love mutterers. They're the best. It's just hard through this thing. Anyway, I'm a mutterer. The second floor of Gatchell's was apparently some kind of a holy trinity of sacred space for 10 to 14-year-olds, boys, where they would go to race their slot cars. Because there was a slot car track there in the 50s and 60s. Before that, it was a toy store area or a toy area on the second floor. And that was at Gatchell Hardware. Gatchell, when I was a young person, when I was young in the 80s, and you would go in and the guy would walk you, you would go to the counter and ask for the things that you want. And he might walk you back to look at the paint selection. He might walk you over to show you the nails and how to fill your own bag. But generally speaking, they were still loading and picking stuff for you at that point in the 1980s. So Gatchell's, of course, an icon. Upper right-hand corner, here's a picture of Cornwell's that became, they called it Herbs for a little while, and then it became Ames Bar and Grill, right on the corner of 30th and Ames. This was a shot, this is a screenshot from a documentary about the Omaha streetcar system from the 1950s. It's a beautiful documentary. If you're interested in it, send me an email and I'll send you a link to it. And then in the bottom center, here it is, the neighborhood icon, the legend, the namesake, the Kenwood Telephone Exchange Building that was built by the Nebraska Telephone Company, an independent telephone company that eventually got gobbled up by Ma Bell. This building was at 30th and Fowler. And there it is. The Kenwood era. The Kenwood era gave it, again, it has a lot of things going on, 1910 to 1965. So also at 30th and Fowler was the Burkhard Gerlich Ford dealer. I'm always fascinated when I learn about North Omaha's depth. And I found a lot, but one of the deepest things was this, again, middle-class, working-class neighborhood community where people had to have things. And one of the things that they had to have was new cars. That didn't happen in my lifetime. There were no new car dealers. Galaxy Ford was a car dealer that devolved kind of from Burkhard Gerlich, 30th and Fowler. And they sold cars, used cars, on this corner when I was a kid in the 80s. But back in the 50s, back in the 40s, back in the 30s, Burkhard and Gerlich, they opened up this business, and then it became Gerlich Ford, and then it became Galaxy Ford. And this was a car dealer right in North Omaha. Another one south of Ames. Does anybody remember Dewey Chevrolet? It's not in this presentation. It's a little bit too far south for me, but all the same, another new car dealer right near 30th and Ames. And then I would be remiss if I didn't highlight Holy Angels Catholic Parish. I was over at 27th and Fowler, so a couple blocks off 30th and Ames, but apparently it was a super important church for a lot of people. Father Flanagan, you know, from Boys Town, his brother was the first priest at Holy Angels and ran it for a very long time and made it successful for a very long time. 27th and Fowler is not in the way, just as a note, it's not in the way of Sorensen Parkway, and it's not in the way of the North Freeway. However, in 1979, the Omaha Catholic Diocese decided, let's let it go. They could see the change that was coming. Thousands of houses were obliterated to make room for the North Freeway. Thousands. And a large section of them, remember, if you will, all the houses that were between Ames and Fort. There were half of that entire community of homes was demolished. This parish was built to serve that region and more, bigger still. But you see the size of that church. It was not a small building. They had their own school that was originally Holy Angels Elementary. It was the parish school. Then it became the Dominican High School, ran by the Dominican nuns as an alternative school. Operated that way from 68 until 83. And then in 83, shabam, the whole enchilada knocked out to make room for the freeway and the parkway. This was the beginning of the big changes for all of North Omaha, but especially for 30th and Ames. One of the big changes that happened in this era in the 1960s is that the Federal Fair Housing Act was enacted, allowing African Americans to move out of the near North Side and to move into new parts of North Omaha, including the Saratoga neighborhood, including the Fairfax neighborhood, including Bedford Place, which was actually built up specifically. It was filled in. It was started development in the 1880s, but didn't actually finish filling in until after World War II, and was specifically marketed to African-American soldiers returning home with their GI Bill and their ability to buy houses. And they were marketed houses in Bedford Place. When the community began to integrate, there were a lot of white people who didn't like that, and they moved out. They moved away. This is what's called white flight. I didn't make this term up. It's not a political term. It's simply a statement of fact. White people left in droves the area around 30th and Ames between 1950, 1960, 1970, and 1990. More than half of the neighborhood, the community's white population, moved west. It was for all kinds of reasons. It wasn't just because white people didn't want to live by black people. And it wasn't all the white people, but it was a lot of them. It was also because the houses were small. These were working class and middle class houses that were built in between 1885 and the 1950s. Those of you who live in Minnelusa or who live up by McMillan know about these houses because these are your houses in this area too. Some of them, the cracker box style, you know, they don't have gutters, they don't have eaves, they don't have windows that stick out, all of these kinds of things. They were built fast to make World War II housing meet those demands. But they were also built earlier than that for people who were living on more modest means. By the 1960s, people wanted bigger houses. They also wanted to live by new shopping. Ames Plaza was part of that white flight where white people moved out to live by that new shopping center. They also moved over by 72nd and Dodge, north and west of that, into new suburban ranch style homes. They also moved north into areas like High Point and away from 30th and Ames. In the meantime, African Americans moved into that neighborhood. More lower income people, more working class people moved into that area around 30th and Ames. And the community was changing and evolving. This was the end of the Kenwood era. This was the end of the period when all of the businesses boomed and all of the institutions grew. This was the beginning of the change. Now, one of the most iconic institutions of that Kenwood era was Merchant's Biscuit Company for a little while. Originally, it was called Eiden Bartenschmeier or something. I can't say it right. Has anybody got the pronunciation of the original factory's name? Eiden Bartenschmeier or something to this effect. Anyway, it became, and what we all know it as, is U.S. Mills. This entire building still stands today as an icon at 30th and Taylor, just south of Ames. You can see in the foreground a picture of the Beltline Railway. You see how this is all tying together? All of these eras, they lead to this picture of where we're at right now. Of course, today OPS owns this building and it's used as a storage facility, as temporary schools for schools that are getting renovated. Does anybody have any connection to this building? Do you remember it? Did anybody work there or go to school there or anything?
Volunteered there. Just listening to second graders read.
Awesome. Of course, if you've ever eaten a Girl Scout cookie, does anybody know the connection of this building to the Girl Scout cookie?
No.
Go ahead.
Nobody knows.
This was the first place in America where Girl Scout cookies were manufactured. Oh, right there at 30th and Ames.
Oh, it's a sacred spot.
It
then.
is.
I'm just saying. And I am susceptible to Samoa cookies. I love them very much. They hurt my soul not to have all the time. Some people like their Thin Mints. I will soak those in coffee. But those Samoa cookies, I just can't get enough of. Also, that's Girl Scouts. I blame them for getting hooked on the shortbread cookies. Those still. Anyway, this is the place right here, the first place in America where Girl Scout cookies were manufactured on large scale. 30th and Ames. Then this transition happens. into this modern era. And I pinned it down at 1965, a little bit arbitrary, but it ties in with white flight. It ties in with the Fair Housing Act. It ties in with these transitions that were happening in North Omaha overall. The main picture in this image, you can see that I colorized a black and white photo. But if you have any memories of 30th and Ames, maybe you remember these buildings. The Kenwood Bakery is clear on the left. This is towards the end of its existence. The Napa store was there for another 15 years after this photo. St. Vincent de Paul's in this photo. The old Kenwood telephone exchange building's back there. The Hinky Dinky store became a laundromat by now. It's got an awning on it. You could see Gatchel's. You could see the coffee house. This building on the corner right here, we're going to talk about it in a few minutes and what it's become. But back then, this was Safeway on the northeast corner of 30th and Ames. Dun, dun, dun. Now, in the upper right-hand corner, some people are threatened by this photo, but I'm going to tell you, when was the last time you saw 500 people gather at 30th and Ames? Say what you will, it is what it is, and it happened. And it's happening sometimes. Bottom left-hand corner, you can see that building that I mentioned earlier from the 1917 photo. It's still there. The Associated Tax Building. You can see the building next to it that says Joe's Fashions on this, Joe's Super Fashions or something. That business is gone. That building's still there. Of course, that building was the Kenwood Drug Store. And then to the right of it, you can see the Gatchel Hardware Store. Now, I call 30th and Ames a historic commercial district. Nobody agrees with me yet. But I hope somebody will take up that mantle and make it happen. If you want to know how, let me know. Apparently, the Nebraska State Historical Society doesn't like me advocating for things because I don't live in Omaha. But hey, what do you do? Keep going. All right. This modern era, when people think about 30th and Ames, they often get this kind of an image in their mind. A working class guy with a look of consternation on his face. Maybe an empty business in the background. Maybe some old cars. Oh, wait, these cars were modern when this photo was taken. You recognize that 78 Nova. Somebody in there does. Because I just made up the number, but I know that's a Nova's End. Anyway, the coffee house, you get the other buildings in this picture. Well, here's today. Cash Saver. That's what I was going for. Phil's Cash Saver.
Bill's cash.
Anyway, say what you will. Here it is. That's the building that was getting built in that photo from 1962 from the Omaha Booster. And then, of course, in the upper right-hand corner, the McDonald's. The McDonald's was a popular place for people at North to sneak away from at lunchtime and go get food. Of course, they don't do it anymore. Young people never leave schools without permission. These other current institutions, this is history as it happens right now. Good Stop is on the southwest corner of 30th and Ames. The American National Bank, of course, used to be the North Side Bank. It's been rebuilt, but it's still there. Burger King replaced all those buildings, including Hested's and Kenwood Drug and Ames Bar and Grill. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, oh, I just hinted at this a minute ago. Scooter's Coffee used to be Safeway. Of course, then it was Commercial Federal for a long time, the first ever bank that I ever walked into. Of course, Scooter's had its drive-through knocked down the other year.
Yes.
But they're doing good today. Go to Scooter's if you haven't been. Good business, working locally. Now, here's the U.S. Mills building, the Omaha Public Schools building, the Eiten Beitenmeyer, the Merchants Biscuit Company building. Still standing right now. Does anybody know about the other two photos that are shown here, the upper left or the upper right?
No.
All right. If anybody here is a cereal nerd, you'll appreciate Uncle Sam's cereal. Uncle Sam's is formulated in a special way, made and packaged right here in the upper left-hand corner and sent across America and around the world for more than 75 years from this location. The cereal is still going today. It's manufactured by a different company. It's underneath the same name. You can order it on Amazon. It's a fine cereal. It's like almost like an uncooked oatmeal. porridge-ish, you know, but it was made right here. This building, this structure still stands, I think, but that building on the right-hand side next to the silos, that building was actually built in the 1890s and was originally called the Weir Omaha Brush Company. That's it. 28th and Taylor. It was repurposed into the U.S. Mills, or I'm sorry, into the Uncle Sam cereal building. The U.S. Mills building was originally built for a different company than Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam's company eventually bought it, and that's when it became U.S. Mills. But the original name of the building at 30th and Taylor, the tan one right there, was Eiton, the second name that I cannot say. All right, in the upper right-hand corner, this is the Orchard. Wait. I'm not going to remember the name of it. A popular furniture store in downtown Omaha. Orchard
Wilhelm. Orchard Wilhelm.
Orchard Wilhelm. This was a manufacturing and warehousing facility that was built for them at 28th and Taylor. This building still stands today. I love the style of this. It looks very concrete and gray, but in reality, it's an Art Deco style building. It's got some really unique styling on it. You can imagine all of those flat gray spaces on it. It used to be windows, and it had a lot of light pouring in, and it was a very healthy environment. Today, it's tucked away, 28th and Taylor. Of course, a lot of people are familiar with this beautiful institution. This is the Charles B. Washington branch of the Omaha Public Library. It was named in honor of a North Omaha activist, an African-American reporter who worked with the Omaha Star for a very, very long time and was a community leader. Charles Washington had a television program and did all kinds of stuff around the community. A strong advocate, a strong character, and today this library is named in his honor. And this building's been rebuilt and opened as a library. This institution, this facility, has been built and rebuilt 4 times. I've tracked it all the way back to 1900 when it was an ad hoc library at 24th and Ames inside of a drugstore. Then it moved across the street to 25th and Ames into an old church and became the first North Branch Library. Then it moved here to 29th and Ames and was put into a building in the 1930s. It was built by the WPA, and that building stood into the 1970s when this Charles B. Washington branch was opened. This building's been reconstructed a few times and added on to as well. So the Omaha Public Libraries do in their neighborhood. Now, I've spouted and spewed a lot of names and told you a lot of things in the last 53 minutes, but we're going to hit the ending here pretty hard and fast. I want you to get a sense of the number of places around 30th and Ames that are historic in some sense. This Standard Oil Company station was on the southwest corner of 30th and Ames. There's still a gas station there today. I showed a picture of it a few minutes ago. But this was the old-timey station. Check out the industries. Here I have 11 of them. There are 20 total factories immediately around 30th and Ames. The Douglas Motor Factory, the Hicks Retinning Company. That was over at 27th and Ames, right where the North Freeway ran through. The Nebraska Public Power Company substation. You've seen it. You know it. It's right there. 30th and Sorensen Parkway on the southwest corner. Orchard and Wilhelm Company factory. I mentioned that. The Omaha Casket Company had a factory. The Overland Tire Rubber Company, Overland Trail Rubber Company. U.S. Mills, Uncle Sam's Breakfast Foods, Omaha Brush Company, Mercy Wassey and Company factory. The Eiton Barmettler Biscuit Factory. Eiton Barmettler was the name of that factory. These were some of the industries. Some of the food. Cornwell's Bar and Grill, which eventually became number 8, Ames Bar and Grill. Kenwood Pastry Shop, also called Kenwood Bakery. The Coffee Shop. Phil's Foodway, Safeway Grocery, Hinky Dinky, Burger King, Scooter's Coffee. There was an Italian sub shop that was at 30th and Ames. And I can't find the name of it or any information about it yet. If you know anything, let me know. Retail. People were selling stuff around 30th and Ames and have been for a long time. The Beacon Theater, Berry's Grocery, Burkhardt Gerlich Ford, Galaxy Motors. Burkhardt Gerlich Ford was so nice. I mentioned it twice. Galaxy Motors, I mentioned a second time as well. Dewey Smith Chevrolet, Gatchel Hardware, Hested's Five and Dime, the Kenwood Dress Shop, Kenwood Pastry Shop, Kenwood Feed Store, Kenwood Drugstore, Kenwood Jewelers. People really liked Kenwood. Phil's Foodway, Safeway Grocery, St. Vincent de Paul. That list goes on. I didn't even mention the small retail spaces. Services, including the commercial federal savings and loan. There was a company called Dial Finance that operated right at 30th and Ames, Florence Transfer and Vaughn Vans, the Kenwood Telephone Exchange Building, the Northside Bank. Any others? Other places worth mentioning are the Monmouth Park School, the Druid Hill School, the North Library and the Charles B. Washington branch, the Holy Angels Catholic Parish. That list goes on. The nearest Lutheran church was over by 24th and Ames. Originally opened. Now, people don't know this, and some people get upset, but I think it's worth mentioning. The church that became Trinity Lutheran originally was at 24th or 25th and Ames. I can give you more details on that if you're interested. The Lutheran Church of Our Redeemer, which ended up at 24th and Meredith, was originally started at 24th and Ames. So they weren't really around 30th and Ames. I don't know of any other Lutheran church that was close to this area. Up the hill was the Emmanuel Hospital's chapel, which of course was Lutheran, but I don't know otherwise. There were also not a lot of other churches right around 30th and Ames, aside from Holy Angels. Does anybody know anything else around 30th and Ames that should be mentioned for the good of the conversation? Businesses, places?
You start talking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Urban renewal of the late sixties into the seventies made a lot of these changes. You got up to 30th Street and Sorensen. I graded from 30th to 37th. There's two different elevations. Everything east of 30th, a lot of it is floodplain. And back in the early days, steamboats were still going up and down Missouri. So they didn't even know what a floodplain was back there, but they don't now. But the reason it's two levels is that a local big demolition contractor, biggest one in the United States, he needed dirt for all the low levels. So that's why one elevation's this high and the other one, so they just hauled dirt off. They weren't supposed to, but it should have been more even. But those train trestles have taken a lot of trucks and stuff that were much over 10 or 11 foot high, but
yep,
some are gone. I don't know if they removed the one down by OPPD yet, even or not.
So they talked about that in the scientists, the nerds who talk about these things, they call terraforming. The whole idea was that, and is that we as humans, we change the earth. We literally form the earth and reform the earth to meet our needs. And that's not so popular anymore because we know about the environmental impacts. But the reality is, there used to be a gigantic ravine that went where Sorensen Parkway is right now, underneath Florence Boulevard, underneath 24th Street. That was a ravine. That was a huge wide open rip. And they made the railroad go through there. And then eventually they put the freeway, the parkway through there. And the reason is because that was natural earth, but they changed it to make it into our purposes. Same thing with these roads and streets. 30th and Ames was originally a little tiny hill, and they leveled it down at the turn of the century to put streetcars through. Interesting side note that plays into your comment. Predating cars, of course, were streetcars. The first streetcar through 30th and Ames ran through in the 1890s. But that's a streetcar as we think of it today. With regard to electricity and moving that car, it went all the way to 33rd. Eventually it got to 36th. It was amazing. Eventually it got to 42nd and Grand. Different story. But the first streetcar without electricity in Omaha were actually horse-drawn wagons. And it ran on rails. So imagine those rails. Imagine that car was about 14 feet long. It could hold about 29 passengers, 28 passengers, somewhere in there. And was pulled by horses, by a team of horses along this rail up 30th Street to Ames, and then it would turn there. In 1901, there was a streetcar battle. They had leveled down the street. They were putting in streetcar lines. The horse-drawn carriage was, or the horse-drawn streetcar was going north on 30th. The electric streetcar was coming west on Ames. These two teams of construction crews met at the intersection of 30th and Ames. And for 4 hours, there was a standoff. And they threw rocks and bolts at each other because they couldn't decide who would get to go through the intersection. because one company's tracks was going to screw up the other ones. Police had to be called to stop the two crews and to send them home. The next day, there was a coin toss between the two companies, and the electric company won, and the horse-drawn carriage did not continue north of Ames for more than 7 or 8 years after that, when eventually it was laid from Ames to Florence Main Street. But that's another story for a different day. But yeah, that terraforming and moving the dirt, big deal that helped make the whole neighborhood happen. Any other questions, folks? I see right now that we're at our hour mark. Does anybody have any more questions?
They didn't know what to do on the freeway till they got up to south of Florence. And they're still talking as of recent as last year about getting the freeway going. But the thing is, you hit Ponca Hills up there. Nobody else knows how to go through Ponca Hills without destroying that.
That's right.
But
I love
go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's all right. I love doing these then and now photos here. 3 for your entertainment. 1935 in the upper left-hand corner. 1971 on the right-hand side. 2022 on the bottom left. 30th and Ames looking north on 30th. All right. And then finally, if you're interested in learning more about some of this, go to Amazon, order any of my books. It'll spill some more beans. North Omaha History, Volumes 1, 2, and 3. Rock Bottom, A History of Florence. And hashtag Omaha Black History, African American People, Places, and Events from the past in Omaha. And then finally, thank you all. Remember that all this information and so much more is available for you right now for free at NorthOmahaHistory.com. Thanks again to Jill and Mt Olive for having me, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Adam,
Yes.
how long did you live in Omaha?
My total time spent, I think that I could get credit for, is about 14 years.
That's interesting that
You graduated from North in what year?
I graduated from North back in 1993. It was all my formative years. I went to Miller Park and to Sherman and to McMillan and to North. I eventually got to go to Nebraska Wesleyan and UNO and UNL. I did a tour of schools, and then I had the opportunity to move to the Pacific Northwest, and I took it. I tried to get back to Omaha annually to be able to hang out with people and see the good folks. And yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, there he is. There he is. Thank you.
Can we still talk or?
Yeah. You can still talk, right?
I'm going to sit right here. Yeah.
The Metro Community College was instrumental in cleaning up that area, and it was pretty positive. They did some good things there next to Fort Omaha. But you've been talking about horses and mules this whole period. And Metro took a whole mule barn and restored it.
Yep.
You know, that good stuff doesn't always make the news, but they didn't want everything to go. Because when they were knocking Jobbers Canyon down, there were a lot of upset people around. But,
Oh, for sure. And Metro,
it could have been that 30th and Ames could have almost been like the city of Omaha. I mean, is the center of the city of Omaha almost.
Well, there was actually an article heading that I found in the past that said that 24th and Ames was its own downtown.
Yeah.
And to go to 24th and Ames right now and see that there's 0 buildings left on the corners, all gone. You know, it's mind-boggling the difference between then and now. But you're right. You're right in Fort Omaha getting saved, and Metro gets all the credit for that. They've worked so hard.
It's been a situation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you.
Jill, I can see the cookie.
Send you a cookie or two.
I see there's a whole box of them.
Well, there's actually 2, and then there's
Doing
some
the race
cake.
riots in business, but for their own thing, but I knocked the building out of 25th and Ames. And the little kids in the neighborhood come up and they didn't wanna see that building going either. But they were trying to clean up that area. They would throw bricks at our machines and stuff. They were so upset.
Yeah, lots of changes,
Lot of
lots of
hope.
courses.
There's a lot of hope for that area yet.
I hope so.
How do we get you a cookie?
You know, just put all that pressure on Jill and keep reminding her. I would like it soft. I don't like a crunchy cookie. So no pressure, but make that happen.
I'll get right on that.
Right on
You know,
that.
it's not like Easter
You know
is in
your
2 weeks
presentation is good.
and I've got something to do.
No pressure, Jill. No pressure.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Adam.
All right,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good job.